In a medical center, a soon-to-be mom named Anne is quickly taken into the hospital because she was hit by lightning, which made her baby come early. The hours pass slowly, and finally the doctor has a chat with her husband, Greg. He shares the sad news that Anne didn't survive childbirth. He assures Greg that the newborn is alive, but he's worried that the baby might have some health issues. They've noticed that the baby has no color in his skin, but they think this is because he has albinism, a condition that is inherited and not related to the lightning strike. Greg insists on seeing his son, and the doctor takes him to the room where his son is placed in an incubator, a special machine that helps babies who are born too early. The doctor explains that the wires attached from the incubator to another device are there to watch the baby's brain activity. Tears fill Greg's eyes as he looks at his son, and he can't believe what he is seeing. He can't accept this baby with the unusual appearance as his son. As if the baby can feel the cold and negative feelings in Greg's thoughts, he starts crying too. As Greg leaves the room, still in disbelief, the machine monitoring the baby's brain activity starts beeping crazily. Fast forward about 20 years later, a local police officer named Sheriff Barnum gets in touch with Jessie Caldwell, who runs a shelter for young people in their town. He needs her at an old country house where an elderly man has recently passed away. He guides her into the house, showing her a shattered cup on the living room floor, explaining that the man had a heart attack the previous night and was found by neighbors in the morning. Before taking her to the basement, he explains why he needed her there. There's a boy hiding down there who won't come out, and Jessie is the only person he could think of who might be able to help. According to the neighbors, the boy looks different, and even though he's been living there for many years, no one has really seen him properly. This has led the sheriff to think that the boy might be the grandson of the old man, hidden away in the basement so that the world wouldn't judge him for his appearance. They slowly and carefully walk into the dimly lit basement, and there, in a hidden corner, they find the boy. As Jessie extends her hand towards the boy, he steps into the faint light, revealing his extremely pale skin, devoid of hair, and striking purple eyes. They ask him what his name is. He responds, saying that his grandparents used to call him Powder, but his real name is Jeremy Reed. Sheriff Barnum then leaves them alone to grab some food for Jessie and Jeremy. While chatting, Jessie wonders why Jeremy didn't alert the police or anyone else when his granddad fell ill. Jeremy explains that his grandfather had always warned him that if anyone saw him, they'd take him away. He tells her he's never been to a school, but he's read all the books stored in the basement. Jessie takes out a book from a shelf, one that she believes even college students find hard to digest. She opens it to a random page, 216. Jeremy tells her to name any page number, and she repeats the same number, 216. He then recites the first paragraph of that page perfectly from memory, promising that he can do the same with any other book. Curious to hear the rest of the story? Please subscribe, and now I'll tell what happened next. Eventually, Jeremy steps out of the basement with Jessie. As he comes out, there's an odd event. All police sirens and radios suddenly start malfunctioning. When Jessie takes Jeremy away in her car, Sheriff Barnum observes something unusual. The house has about a dozen lightning rods on its roof. Officer Harley Duncan shares with Barnum that he has an uneasy feeling about Jeremy. He also tells Barnum that the doctor said the old man's heart had abnormal rhythms, suggesting that he might have been shocked by electricity. When Jeremy gets out of the car at the shelter, all the other kids stop and stare at him. Jessie arranges a meeting with the chairman to schedule an IQ test for Jeremy. During lunch, Jeremy is seated alone at a table. Seeing him alone, a group of teenagers decide to tease him. John, a guy in his 30s, starts making fun of Jeremy's appearance. He tells Jeremy that it's a tradition for the new guy at the shelter to wear a spoon on his first day. John encourages his buddy Mitch to show Jeremy how it's done. Mitch sticks the spoon onto his nose, much to the amusement of the other teens, who burst out laughing at his goofy appearance. Jeremy then takes the spoon from John, and like a scene out of a science fiction movie, he starts to manipulate it. He somehow makes the spoon stand upright on the table, and strangely, it attracts all the other spoons around, forming a tower of spoons right in the center of the table. This odd spectacle scares everyone, but it angers John, who sees Jeremy as some kind of a weirdo. After a long day at work, Sheriff Barnum comes home to find his son Stephen waiting for him. From the way Barnum completely ignores Stephen, we can tell that there is some deep-rooted tension between them. Stephen seems nervous and worried as he heads upstairs, while Barnum checks on his ailing wife. She's very sick with cancer and is so weak she can't even open her eyes or speak. There are numerous painkiller bottles on the bedside table and a small silver box. Maxine, who takes care of his wife, explains that Stephen brought the box for his mom. The following morning, after the doctor gives Jeremy a clean bill of health, Jessie asks Jeremy if he would like to start school the next week, and he agrees. On one of his first days at school, during a science class, Mr. Donald Ripley is explaining to the students about electric currents. He dims the room and turns on a device known as Jacob's ladder to show how electricity moves. As Mr. Ripley speaks, Jeremy starts to feel extremely uneasy. He holds on tightly to his desk, and he begins to shake. Meanwhile, the machine starts to emit more and more sparks with growing intensity. Suddenly, a bolt of electricity jumps from one electrode to Jeremy's chest, then travels through his body and into the other electrode. As the current passes through him, Jeremy is lifted off his chair and into the air. Unable to turn off the machine, Mr. Ripley grabs a chair and uses it to smash the machine, stopping the electricity and causing Jeremy to fall onto the floor. As the frightened students flee from the classroom, Mr. Ripley moves towards Jeremy, who's lying unconscious. When he touches Jeremy's shoulder, a strange feeling rushes through him, lifting the hairs on his arm and putting him in a semi-dreamlike state. At the hospital, the doctor, a man named Wayne, is skeptical about Mr. Ripley's account of what happened. He explains that such an electric shock should either cause serious harm or at least leave burn marks, but surprisingly, Jeremy is perfectly all right. Mr. Ripley believes Jeremy's body is continuously undergoing a process called electrolysis, which could be the reason why he can't grow any hair. Just then, a nurse informs them that Jeremy has slipped away from the hospital. On his way back to his granddad's house, Jeremy bumps into Lindsay, a girl from his class who saw the incident in the science room. As they chat, some neighbors give Jeremy curious looks. In response, Jeremy tells Lindsay that he can hear people's thoughts and memories, even things they don't realize about themselves. However, she thinks he might be seeing things due to the electric shock he just went through. After getting directions to the interstate bridge from Lindsay, he continues on his journey. But on the bridge, Sheriff Barnum and Officer Duncan catch up with him and force him to go back. In the safety of Barnum's van, he asks Jeremy why he dislikes hospitals. Jeremy replies that the worst memory he has took place in a hospital. When Barnum probes further, Jeremy reveals that it was the day he was born. Back at school, Jeremy is asked to attend a meeting to discuss his IQ test results. The chairman, Dr. Stippler, tells Jeremy that his IQ score is off the charts, so high that there's no existing category for someone with his level of intelligence. Jeremy expresses his desire to return to his granddad's home, but Jesse shares the unfortunate news that the bank now owns the property. The next day, Sheriff Barnum and Officer Duncan take the youngsters from the shelter on a camping trip in the forest. Jeremy, preferring to be alone, sits at a distance from the group. Seeing him by himself, Barnum decides to join him. A storm brews overhead, and Jeremy becomes uneasy. He explains to Barnum that whenever there's thunder, he can feel it deep inside, and lightning seems to seek him out. He recalls his grandmother's words, saying that storms were from God. He then asks Barnum if he believes in God, to which Barnum admits that he doesn't. The next day, Jeremy wanders further into the woods. He puts his hands on the ground, and all the geckos in the vicinity are drawn to him. As he picks one up, the rest of the geckos scatter in fright. Suddenly, he calls out to John and Mitch, who have been secretly watching him from behind a tree. He notices John is holding a gun. John lifts the gun, aiming at Jeremy, threatening that he can end Jeremy's life right there, and the world would have one less strange being to deal with. Suddenly, a gunshot echoes from a distance. All three of them rush towards the sound. They find a group of boys huddled around a deer that's been shot in the heart. Officer Duncan runs over, holding his own gun and gloating about his hunting expertise, seemingly proud of the kill. Jeremy, overwhelmed with emotions, can sense the pain and terror the deer is experiencing in its last moments. Kneeling beside the deer, Jeremy places one hand on its neck, and with the other, he grabs Duncan's wrist. He starts to transfer the deer's agony and fear into Duncan. As the deer jerks, Duncan's pain intensifies. John, threatening to shoot Jeremy if he doesn't let go, gets ready to pull the trigger, but Mitch interferes, lifting the gun upwards, thus sparing Jeremy's life. The gunshot causes Jeremy to release Duncan's wrist. Duncan is now so terrified that the rest of the group has to restrain him to prevent him from fleeing into the woods. Later, after Duncan is taken to the county hospital, Jesse approaches Jeremy to inquire about the events in the woods. When he responds that he just wants to go home, she assures him that she is his friend and only wants to help him. This triggers a burst of anger in Jeremy, as he shouts at her that real friends don't take you away from your home and confine you. While Jeremy's anger swells, the lights in the room, the frames on the walls, and the glass in the door all break into pieces. He then asks Jesse how much longer she thinks she can keep him here against his will. With that, he leaves the room abruptly, leaving Jesse in utter shock. That same night, when Barnum gets home, Dr. Wayne gives him some grim news about his wife's health. She's in severe pain, the worst she's ever experienced. Barnum reflects on his wife's determination to hang on, although he's not sure why she refuses to let go. The doctor admits that there's no way to truly understand her thoughts, since her illness has progressed to the point where she can no longer communicate. The following day at the youth center during lunch, Mr. Ripley pays Jeremy a visit. He shares with Jeremy a unique experience he had when he touched him while he was unconscious in the classroom. He describes a wave of energy that flowed through him, a sensation like no other that made him feel youthful again, as if he was 20 years old. He mentions that Einstein once speculated that if humans could fully utilize 100% of their brains, they would become pure energy. Ripley suspects that something may have happened to Jeremy in the past that allowed him to unlock the full potential of his brain. This might be why Jeremy radiates and is enveloped by the energy Einstein was talking about. He expresses his belief that Jeremy's mind could be the future evolutionary step for humanity, and he wishes to become Jeremy's friend to learn as much as possible from him. The next morning, Barnum drops by Duncan's home to see how he's doing. He observes that Duncan has discarded all his guns, an odd behavior considering Duncan's profound love for hunting. This raises Barnum's concern because Duncan is also avoiding his duty as a police officer by refusing to carry his firearm. Outside, Duncan shares with Barnum the unnerving experience of shooting the deer, describing how Jeremy transferred the deer's anguish into him. Duncan shares with Barnum that in that intense moment, he didn't just experience the deer's death, but he felt as if he'd become the deer, feeling its pain, emotions, and even its memories. The impact of the event was so distressing that Duncan can no longer bear to hold a gun. After hearing Duncan's account, Barnum formulates a plan. That evening, he invites Jeremy to visit his home, leading him upstairs to where his wife is. He asks Jeremy if he could connect with his wife and determine what he needs to do for her to finally let go. As Jeremy lightly touches her forehead, he begins to hear her thoughts. She reveals that she's unable to move on until Barnum finds it in his heart to forgive and accept Stephen. Despite her pleas, Barnum remains unyielding, refusing to forgive Stephen. She then reminds him of a memory when Stephen was a little boy, of a day when all three of them were playing in the snow. She'd lost her wedding ring that day, and both Barnum and Stephen spent hours searching for it. Barnum remembers how Stephen used to come home from school each day and search the snowy patches for the lost ring. Tears streaming down her face, Jeremy relays her message to Barnum. She wants him to open the silver box that Stephen had brought a few days earlier. Upon opening the box, Barnum finds the ring inside, and he can't help but break down in tears. Jeremy explains that Stephen told her that he found the ring while doing some work in the garden at their old house. After Barnum places the ring on his wife's finger, Jeremy gently touches Barnum's wrist with his other hand. Suddenly, Barnum can hear his wife's voice in his head. He comforts her, assuring her that everything will be okay. As he holds her in his arms, she opens her eyes one last time before she gently passes away. When Stephen arrives at the house, Barnum welcomes him into a warm embrace, and they both shed tears of sorrow and relief. A few days later, Jeremy and Lindsay go on a date to the county fair. Jeremy opens up to her, asking if she thinks he's ugly, as his father used to believe. Lindsay reassures him, telling him that he has the most beautiful face she's ever seen. Then, she leans in and kisses him. Lindsay's father, witnessing the tender moment, decides to confront Jeremy. Lindsay's dad turns on Jeremy, calling him nasty names and disrespectfully treating him like an object, not a person. Just in time, Jesse jumps in and loudly calls out Lindsay's dad's name, which ironically is Dick. After making quite a scene, Dick takes one last swipe at Jeremy before leaving with Lindsay in tow. With a heavy heart, Jeremy decides to go back to the one place where he felt accepted, his grandpa's house. On his way out of the youth shelter, a noise from the gym piques his curiosity. Walking in, he sees the other kids engaged in a game of basketball. Suddenly, John corners him and snatches his cap. When Jeremy tries to retrieve it, John challenges him to a fight if he wants the cap back. Just then, Jeremy peeks into John's memories and begins to relay an old story. It was the time when John's stepfather, in a drunken state, took his cap, the only memento from his deceased father. He was challenged just like Jeremy was now, but when he stood up, his stepfather beat him badly, leaving him with injuries so severe that he couldn't attend gym class for a while. Hearing this, John's emotions run high, and he threatens Jeremy's life. Just then, a thunderstorm starts. John drags Jeremy out into the pouring rain, where he and his friends undress Jeremy and toss him into a mud puddle, mocking his pale complexion. As they pull Jeremy back up, John coldly states that Jeremy will never belong. In a burst of sadness and fury, Jeremy unleashes a surge of energy, knocking everyone, including himself, to the ground. When Mitch checks on John, he realizes that John's heart isn't beating. Jeremy quickly applies several electric jolts to John's chest, and miraculously, John's heart starts again. Mitch then decides to help Jeremy escape back to his grandpa's place. He discreetly gets him on a van heading that way. When Jeremy arrives at his grandpa's home, he's met with a gut-wrenching sight. All his belongings, his bed, and the books in the basement, everything's gone. Jesse quickly arrives at the house to comfort Jeremy, promising him that she will help him find a place that he can consider home. Mr. Ripley also joins them as they start to leave, but their departure is cut short by Barnum and Duncan, who who show up to arrest Jeremy and take him back. Jesse begs Barnum to let Jeremy go free, and he concedes. Jeremy then shares with Barnum that when his wife passed away, he could feel her transitioning somewhere else, not just fading away. This brings a rare smile to Barnum's face. Suddenly, Jeremy dashes into the open field and everyone chases after him. The clouds part, and a bolt of lightning strikes Jeremy in the chest, pulsating with energy. The power within him builds until he releases a blast of brilliant energy that spreads across the field. As the energy dissipates, Jeremy disappears, and the clouds close back up. As everyone gazes at the sky in wonder, Barnum begins to tear up as he starts to believe in the existence of life after death. He realizes that his wife didn't merely cease to exist when she died, but rather, she continued to exist in another place, perhaps watching over him and waiting for him. As everyone keeps looking up at the sky, the heavens answer back with one last booming clap of thunder. Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications, and let me know in the comments what you think of the ending of this movie. I guess YouTube didn't show you my other videos. Here are two I think you'll definitely like. So take your pick and watch.